Henry Fielding was an English novelist and dramatist known for his rich earthy humour and satirical prowess, and as the author of the novel Tom Jones. Aside from his literary achievements, he has a significant place in the history of law enforcement, having founded what some have called London's first police force, the Bow Street Runners, using his authority as a magistrate. His younger sister, Sarah, also became a successful writer. Writer, dramatist and novelist, Fielding was born at Chatham and was educated at Eton College, where he established a lifelong friendship with William Pitt the Elder. After a romantic episode with a young woman that ended in his getting into trouble with the law, he went to London, where his literary career began. In 1728, he travelled to Leiden to study classics and law at the university. However, due to lack of money, he was obliged to return to London and he began writing for the theatre, some of his work being savagely critical of the contemporary government under Prime Minister Sir Robert Walpole. The Theatrical Licensing Act of 1737 is alleged to be a direct response to his activities. The particular play that triggered the Licensing Act was the unproduced, anonymously authored, The Golden Rump, but Fielding's dramatic satires had set the tone. Once the Licensing Act passed, political satire on the stage was virtually impossible, and playwrights whose works were staged were viewed as suspect. Fielding, therefore, retired from the theatre and resumed his career in law and, in order to support his wife Charlotte Craddock and 2 children, he became a barrister. His lack of financial sense meant that he and his family often endured periods of poverty, but he was helped by Ralph Allen, a wealthy benefactor who later formed the basis of Squire Olworthy in Tom Jones. After Fielding's death, Allen provided for the education and support of his children. Fielding never stopped writing political satire and satires of current arts and letters. The Tragedy of Tragedies was, for example, quite successful as a printed play. He also contributed a number of works to journals of the day. He wrote for Tory periodicals, usually under the name of Captain Hercules Vinegar. During the late 1730s and early 1740s, Fielding continued to air his liberal and anti-Jacobite views in satirical articles and newspapers. Almost by accident, in anger at the success of Samuel Richardson's Pamela, or Virtue Rewarded, Fielding took to writing novels in 1741 and his first major success was Shawmila, an anonymous parody of Richardson's melodramatic novel. It is a satire that follows the model of the famous Tory satirists of the previous generation. He followed this with Joseph Andrews, an original work supposedly dealing with Pamela's brother, Joseph. Although begun as a parody, this work developed into an accomplished novel in its own right and is considered to mark Fielding's debut as a serious novelist. In 1743, he published a novel in the Miscellanies Volume 3. This was the history of the life of the late Mr. Jonathan Wild the Great. This novel is sometimes thought of as his first because he almost certainly began composing it before he wrote Shawmila and Joseph Andrews. It is a satire of Walpole that draws a parallel between Walpole and Jonathan Wild, the infamous gang leader and highwayman. He implicitly compares the Whig Party in Parliament with a gang of thieves being run by Walpole, whose constant desire to be a great man should culminate only in the antithesis of greatness, being hanged. His anonymously published The Female Husband is a fictionalized account of a notorious case in which a female transvestite was tried for duping another woman into marriage. This was one of a number of small pamphlets and cost 6 pence at the time. Though a minor item in Fielding's total oeuvre, the subject is consistent with his ongoing preoccupation with fraud, sham, and masks. His greatest work was Tom Jones, a meticulously constructed picaresque novel telling the convoluted and hilarious tale of how a foundling came into a fortune. Marriages: Fielding married his first wife, Charlotte Craddock, in 1734. Charlotte, on whom he later modelled the heroines of both Tom Jones and Amelia, died in 1744. By her he had 5 children, of whom a lone daughter, Henrietta, would survive childhood only to die at the age of 23, having already been in deep decline, when she married military engineer James Gabriel Montser months before. 3 years after Charlotte's death, disregarding public opinion, he married her former maid, Mary Daniel, who was pregnant. Mary bore 5 children, 3 daughters who died young and sons William and Alan. The Law, Jurist and Magistrate. Despite this scandal, his consistent anti-Jacobitism and support for the Church of England led to his being rewarded a year later with the position of London's Chief Magistrate, and his literary career went from strength to strength. Joined by his younger half-brother John, he helped found what some have called London's first police force, the Bow Street Runners, in 1749. According to the historian G. M. Trevelyan, they were 2 of the best magistrates in 18th-century London, and did a great deal to enhance the cause of judicial reform and improve prison conditions. His influential pamphlets and inquiries included a proposal for the abolition of public hangings. This did not, however, imply opposition to capital punishment as such was evident, for example, in his presiding in 1751 over the trial of the notorious criminal James Field, finding him guilty in a robbery and sentencing him to hang. Despite being now blind, John Fielding succeeded his older brother as Chief Magistrate and became known as the Blind Beak of Bow Street for his ability to recognise criminals by their voice alone. In January 1752 Fielding started a fortnightly periodical titled the Covent Garden Journal, which he would publish under the pseudonym of Sir Alexander Drawcan Seer, K.N.T. Censor of Great Britain until November of the same year. In this periodical, Fielding directly challenged the armies of Grub Street, and the contemporary periodical writers of the day in a conflict that would eventually become the Paper War of 1752-3. Fielding then published examples of the interposition of Providence and the detection and punishment of murder, a treatise in which, rejecting the dustic and materialistic visions of the world, he wrote in favor of the belief in God's presence and divine judgment, arguing that the rise of murder rates was due to neglect of the Christian religion. In 1753 he would write proposals for making an effectual provision for the poor. Fielding's ardent commitment to the cause of justice as a great humanitarian in the 1750s coincided with a rapid deterioration in his health. This continued to such an extent that he went abroad to Portugal in 1754 in search of a cure. Gout, asthma and other afflictions made him use crutches. He died in Lisbon, reportedly in physical pain and mental distress, 2 months later. His tomb is in the city's English cemetery, which is now the graveyard of St. George's Church, Lisbon. Legacy. In the operetta Patience of 1881 by Gilbert and Sullivan, Colonel Culverley sings, the humour of Fielding, which sounds contradictory. Partial list of works: The Masquerade a poem, Love in Several Masks a play, 1728, Rape Upon Rape a play, 1730. Adapted by Bernard Miles as Lock Up Your Daughters. In 1959, filmed in 1974, The Temple Bow a play, 1730, The Author's Farce a play, 1730, The Letter Writers, play, 1731, The Tragedy of Tragedies. Or, The Life and Death of Tom Thumb the Great a play, 1731, The Grub Street Opera a play, 1731, The Modern Husband a play, 1732, The Mock Doctor, play, 1732, The Lottery, play, 1732, The Covent Garden Tragedy a play, 1732, The Miser, play, 1732, The Intriguing Chambermaid, play, 1734, Don Quixote in England, play, 1734, Paskin a play, 1736, Eurydice Hesiod, play, 1737, The Historical Register for the year. 1736 a play, 1737, Shomila a novel, 1741, The History of the Adventures of Joseph Andrews and His Friend, Mr. Abraham Abrams a novel, 1742, The Life and Death of Jonathan Wild, The Great a novel, 1743, Ironic Treatment of Jonathan Wild, the most notorious underworld figure of the time. Published as Volume 3 of Miscellanies. Miscellanies a collection of works, 1743, contained the poem part of Juvenal's sixth satire, modernized in burlesque verse, The Female Husband or The Surprising History of Mrs. Mary alias Mr. George Hamilton, who was convicted of having married a young woman of Wells and lived with her as her husband, taken from her own mouth since her confinement. A Euro pamphlet, fictionalized report, 1746, The History of Tom Jones, a Foundling. A Euro novel, 1749, A Journey from This World to the Next. A Euro 1749, Amelia. Euro novel. 1751, Examples of the Interposition of Providence in the Detection and Punishment of Murder, containing above 30 cases in which this dreadful crime has been brought to light in the most extraordinary and miraculous manner. Collected from various authors, ancient and modern, the Covent Garden Journal. A Euro periodical, 1752, Journal of a Voyage to Lisbon. A Euro travel narrative, 1755, The Fathers, or, The Good Natured Man. A Euro play, published posthumously in 1778. References. External links, works by Henry Fielding at Project Gutenberg, works by or about Henry Fielding at Internet Archive, works by Henry Fielding at LibriVox, famous quotes by Henry Fielding, portraits of Henry Fielding at the National Portrait Gallery, London, archival material relating to Henry Fielding listed at the UK National Archives, Oxford Dictionary of National Biography.